There was a man.
He went to San Francisco by himself when he was young. He was imprisoned 3 times, had 4 wives in different periods, became a hero 5 times, and won court cases 6 times. He had 8 sons, more than 40 grandsons and granddaughters. The man settled down in North America and lived up to 100 years old before he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his extended family and offsprings. Please welcome the 8 young Chinese Americans who will tell this heroic tale.
Hi, my name is Mina Liang and I'm a sophomore at Columbia University. I'm excited to be reading today TangMen. Hope that you guys all enjoy. One morning of 1863, the chief of the Indian Sioux tribe noticed something very strange. There was a big cloud of strange fog floating near the cliff of a river. When the cloud of fog was moving very fast towards this chief, he put his ear on the rock nearby. He soon realized that something very serious was about to happen, for the big cloud of fog had come from the breathing of a lot of people and horses. The chief immediately blew the trumpet to alarm his people in the valley. His people came out with the bows and spears in their hands, all to prepare for battle. The chief shouted, "The white men are going to rob our land and to steal our gold. We must fight." The railroad was going to be built near where the Indian people lived. And according to the Bill of Railroads, the land within 80 kilometers of both sides of this railroad needed to be sold to the railroad business owner at a discounted price. However, the Sioux tribe had refused to leave, thus triggering the white men to fight and expel the Indians by force in order to build the railroad. The army of white men was well equipped with horses and guns, and so a brutal battle was expected. Several hundreds of Indians were killed in this bloody battle. The chief was shot in his shoulder. He witnessed his own son being killed in front of him. At last, there were only about 20 of the Indians who had survived. Some of them grabbed horses and guns from the white men, putting their chief onto a horseback and retreating towards Nevada mountain range. The chief roared in despair, "The land is precious to us, like air and water. It belongs to the Indians. It is ours." At that time, there was a fierce civil war between the north and southern parts of America at Gettysburg. Jia Dongli, who had a long braid on his back, was assigned into a mixed army group marching towards Gettysburg. They were determined to defeat the Southern Army, waving their banners very high. The group head of the North American Army, Aldrich, ran ahead of everyone, raising his banner high. The head of the Southern Army, Adolf, waved his gun, running towards the Northern Army. The soldiers of both sides were engaged in a fierce, bloody battle, shouting and shooting. Aldrich was shot and fell. Jia Dongli continued running forward to the Southern troops. The soldiers of the North fell one after another. Jia Dong was shot in his eye as well as his body, but he still managed to put the banner to the battlefield before he finally himself fell to the ground. Adolf was shot in his leg and crawled away from the battlefield quietly. While in China, in the eastern hemisphere of the gold, the Qing dynasty was trying to conquer the Boxer Rebellion, one of the biggest civil wars in history. The bloody battle had almost turned every river from blue to red. The war impacted more than 600 cities across 18 provinces. Millions of people were unaccounted for, wounded, or killed. In addition, there were earthquakes, floodings, and all kinds of natural disasters on the land. Many people survived by only eating tree bark. At dusk, in a small town, Shanwu of Guangdong, there was a Chinese restaurant called TangMen. The lady boss, Yu Tongmei, instructed her son to shut down the business for the day and close all the doors, since there were not going to be many customers around. She felt that his husband's boat might arrive soon, so she hurried her sons to go to the harbor to wait for their father. The Li family had 4 sons. The elder son, Genshin, was 23 years old. He had already been married and had children. He only wanted to have a quiet life in this small town. The second son, Genmao, was 18 years old. He went through elementary schooling for a few years and learned martial arts as well. He was a carpenter, but he often made trouble for the family. The third son was Genlong, who was 14 years old. He was a quiet boy who liked to read and also knew how to do accounting for their family business. And the fourth son, Genwang, had just turned 10 years old. He knew how to write essays and do the abacus, and when he was in a good mood, he even wrote poems. "Where is Genmao?" the mother asked. "He went away for lunch," Genshin answered. "I know he's probably with Juzi," Genwang told her. "I know that he's dating that girl against my will. How could that girl be a good wife for him?" the mother grumbled. Genlong took off a poster from the front gate wall, and he read it very carefully. The Qing dynasty was recruiting youths of 14 years old and under to attend a special school in Guangzhou and Shanghai, preparing them to advance their communications with foreign countries. The school would educate them in foreign languages, literatures, and natural sciences. And there would be 4 different foreign languages that would be taught in this school: English, French, Japanese, and Russian. Genlong was very excited. "Mom, this is wonderful. I'm 14 and I want to go to school." The mother sighed deeply. "This is such a new thing that I have never heard before. Let's talk about it when your dad comes back. Let's go to the harbor to meet your dad now." The father of this family, Jiadong, had arranged for the marriage of Genmao, the second son, long before the wedding date was in August of that lunar calendar year. The fiancee's name was Afang, the daughter of Yu Tongmei's sister. Afang was 3 years older than Genmao, and according to local culture, the wife of the 3-year-old senior would bring a good fortune to the family. Back in June, Jiadong delivered a message to his family informing them that he would be back home towards the end of August and that everyone should be well prepared for the wedding. His wife, the lady of the house, brought the whole family to the harbor, waiting for his arrival day after that day in August. But it was already October. How come Jiadong was nowhere to be seen? Was it possible that something had happened to him? Genmao was very happy about this delay. He was trying to avoid the marriage. He had met his cousin, his future wife, when he was very young, and he did not like her. She was like an emotionless piece of wood. Genmao fell in love with this girl, Juzi, the daughter of Dr. Ma, the Chinese traditional medicine doctor in town. Boss He was over 30, became very wealthy from gold mining, and once he had arrived, he started to build a large house. He publicly announced that he wanted to take Juzi, the most beautiful young lady in town, as his wife. Genmao rushed to the backyard of the clinic. He hid himself in the orange trees and blew a whistle, and then mimicked birds singing, and before long, Juzi, a beautiful girl, appeared from the clinic. This was the secret sign for them to meet. Genmao pledged to her that he would convince his dad to withdraw the wedding arrangement that had been made for him, and he would marry her officially. "Do not marry that ugly old man who is already more than 30 years old," he would tell her. "Wealth does not matter that much. I'll have tons of money later on." And he pledged this to the girl whom he loved so deeply. Juzi pledged to Genmao as well. "I will only marry you. No one else matters to me whether they have money or not." And so they secretly became engaged. Genmao gave Juzi a special gift as the witness of his pledge, a small, delicate wooden fish that he carved with care and love, and he put this in her hair. Juzi gave Genmao a sachet with an embroidered bird. She also put mixed herb medicine into the sachet, which had a pleasant aroma. She gave the sachet to Genmao as the witness of her pledge to marry her. The whole Li family was very sad because they waited in vain at the harbor. The whole time, the mother thought that this was not the best way to handle the situation, as they did not know what had happened to the husband, as there was no message for him from a long time. So she decided to send Genshin, the eldest son, to go and find him. But Genshin didn't want to go as he had his own wife and children with him at home. But Genmao wanted to find his father. Genlong and Genwang wanted to go as well, so at last the mother decided to send Genshin and Genmao, keep the younger 2 sons around to help her with the restaurant business. Juzi wept all the way to the harbor that day she had to say goodbye to Genmao. Since on January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of America, had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, many slaves had been released from their owners and had come to the northern cities to find jobs. In the April of that year, Civil War had broken out. Lincoln had wanted to recruit 70,000 soldiers in New York, but people who were wealthy could avoid being drafted by donating $300 to the government. This regulation angered an Irish boy, Alan, who had fled to New York City in order to leave the famine in Ireland. Alan, who was only 19 years old and had light freckles on his face and light colored hair, ran in the forefront of a demonstration parade in New York City. He led people and smashed the windows of the offices that were in charge of soldiers' recruitments and stores that were also owned by people who were black. He had had enough. He was being robbed the opportunity to work due to the flooded labor market of the released slaves. Alan thought he had been humiliated by the released slaves, and so he smashed these windows hard to release his anger and bitterness. People from England had come to America 200 years earlier than the slaves who were in the North, and he could not tolerate that he felt like a second citizen to them. Why all of a sudden had these ex-slaves showed up, and why did they have equal rights as he did? Police car sirens approached, and Alan's friends asked Alan to run, but he refused. Why should I? I'm not afraid. I'm going to argue with them. The lives of the wealthy are precious. Why should we go to war in order to sacrifice our lives? Alan argued. Run, Alan. You need to run unless you want to be in prison or be put in the war, his friends argued back. But where should I run for? He would ask. Go to San Francisco, they advised. Find your brother and pan gold, build railroads, or do any work you can find, but you cannot stay here. Alan was the fifth boy in his family, and unfortunately the year he was born was the year of the famine in Ireland. There was the Irish potato famine, and it caused more than 1 million of Ireland lives to flee from their home country, seeking ways of survival elsewhere. Alan's father had died very early, so Alan had to work on a boat when he was only 11 years old. Alan arrived at San Francisco by boat from New York City. He finally escaped the Civil War in Ireland. 3 years ago, he came to North America and worked as a short-term labor farmer in the farmer market. He earned $10 a month, and the life was very difficult for him, but he survived without skipping too many meals. And at least he didn't need to work hard by floating on the sea anymore. He wanted to settle down and have a normal life. He felt very fortunate to be accepted here along with other refugees and nationalized to become a citizen of the United States. He was bothered that President Lincoln asked them to go to the war with the South because he didn't want to die. In his early years, he had seen so many people die that he refused to be like them. He wanted to have money and live a life like the wealthy people that he had seen. When Alan had just gotten off his boat, another big ship was coming from Hong Kong. Genshin and Genmao came off of that busy boat, and before they were able to stand still on land, they were robbed. When Genmao chased after the robber, he bumped into Alan. Genmao apologized to Alan, but Alan couldn't even understand him. Alan frowned. Where did these people come from? Did this land belong to white people? The black slaves had just been released, and where were all these Asian people coming from? When Genmao passed by, Alan smelled something unpleasant, similar to his own body odor, and he hated that smell. It was very fortunate that the money sewed into Genmao's clothes were still there, not taken by the robbers. Unfortunately, it was only sufficient to survive for a few days, and so the two brothers went into Chinatown trying to find their father, but no one knew who they were looking for. They saw many recruiting posters on the wall, but one of them was recruiting 50 Chinese workers to build a railroad. The salary was $26 a month, not including room and board. That was a very high salary compared to what they had earned at home. The whole family would work hard for a year, and that would not match the salary that they would earn on the railroad here for a month. Wow, the money here is so easy to make, grinned Genshin. Genmao was, however, unwilling to do the work. We came here to find our father. We need to find him and take him home. And then what? Go back to marry Juzi? The boss Khil will get to her before you do. Do not dream about her anymore, the brother argued. Let's go to work and make some money and keep yourself alive, and then we'll talk about other things. So, the two brothers answered the recruiting ad and came to the working site of a railroad near the Nevada mountain range. A railroad started from Sacramento near San Francisco, with twists and turns for 40 miles, and then it stopped. In front of it, there was a very dangerous mountain range. In order to continue to build the railroad, the mountain ranges would be required to be split, which was extremely challenging. Most white workers had put down their shovels. Some left for good, and others went back to their tents to drink and sleep. Most of them just sat there complaining. Alan was very upset about this. How could they delay an escape just by solving this problem? We should negotiate with the head of the business owners for better treatment and seeking ways of solving this problem, he thought to himself. Alan was able to adapt and adjust to the situation very quickly. Given his childhood of working as a hard laborer on ships, he had a lot of practice. He arrived at San Francisco and found the railroad job through his relatives. Because he had led people, and these people were crashing and smashing into the recruiting station of the Northern Army, and the stores were owned by black owners, he had gained a reputation as a leader with vision and courage despite his young age. Of course, Alan understood how his relatives felt about him, and he was very willing to be their representative to voice their interests. He jumped onto a high hill, waving his arms high above his head to raise a proposal to the large crowds. This project is very difficult, but it provides us with a stable income so we can raise our families. We will not give up. We should negotiate a higher wage and make it a requirement for us to continue the work. The people agreed. They said, "Yes, how about you go and negotiate a higher wage with the business owner on our behalf? But what wage should we ask for?" He replied, "How about from $30 to $35, and we will not continue the work until they accept our request." Great idea. Everyone in the crowd was excited and shouted, "Only 8 hours a day, no overtimes. We are not cattle. We are human beings. You tell them this." Alan continued his talk to the large crowd. "We endured a long journey on the sea to come to this new continent to start a new life. We are not coming to become a slave. Take a closer look at the mountain ranges. There are several mountains behind this one. This one is with an altitude of 100 meters, but the mountains behind this one are several thousand meters above sea level. Even now, we can feel the lack of oxygen when we work. How would we feel when we are working at a much higher altitude? This kind of project work is not for humans. The wage of $35 is not that high in comparison to what we're doing. I think we should ask for $40. Some of the people in the crowds showed concern. The soldiers in Gettysburg who might lose their lives in any moment are only paid $30 a month. Are we asking too much? Alan replied, "I don't think so. When America established its country, their first amendment was, 'We the people are born to be equal.' And why should the business owners be richer than us? Why should we work so hard to make a living?" The crowds were inspired by Alan's speech. They shouted after him, "We are all on strike to ask for higher wages and refuse to work until our demands are met." In the distance, the engineer Oliver, who had a tall, square face and a lot of red hair, led a group of Chinese workers coming the same way. The anxious Adolf, who was the head of the workers, stuck his head out of the window from a train car parked on the railroad due to the strike. He immediately left the train car, happily walked towards Oliver with a gentleman's stick in his hand. Adolf, in blue jeans, who was thin and tall, with a long face and high nose, rarely smiled and had a bad temper. He often argued with workers who were on strike. Adolf had chosen to be away from the battlefield after he was wounded in the Civil War between the North and the South. He owned a small grocery store in California. Adolf was born in Germany and migrated to Connecticut with his father when he was 16 years old, and together they operated a small wholesale store of cloth and contracted to build 12 miles of this railroad. As the oldest son of his family, Adolf often helped his father to build the railroad, carrying shovels, and later when gold mines were discovered in California, Adolf went to California to pan gold. On the side, he also operated a branch of wholesale store of clothes. He imported clothes, bed sheets, and other small personal items from East Coast at the beginning. Then he found out that the demand for tent cloths was very high, and so he became a tent cloth wholesaler exclusively. 2 years ago, Oliver led a project to build a railroad from Sacramento to Nevada with the white workers. But the project had progressed so slowly that the director of the project thought it was impossible to finish, and so he quit his job. It was by total coincidence that the engineer Oliver was also Adolph's cloth client. And when he learned that Adolph was experienced in building railroads in Connecticut, he invited him to be the construction director of this project. Adolf asked his sister to take care of his cloth business, and he came over to supervise the building of the railroad. The strike among the white workers had already gone on for over half a month. If this continued, the loss for the Central Pacific Railroad Company would become even higher. $50 million of railroad bonds were being issued publicly, and once the railroad advanced for one more mile, they could get the land within the railroad of 122 meters on both sides for free. Although there was so much land in front of them, they could not get it unless they could advance the railroad further. The board of directors of the Central Pacific Railroad Company met many times, but they had not found a way to solve the problem. The governor of California and the chairman of board of directors of the Central Pacific Railroad Company were directors at Stanford. They had thought of asking the government to release the war prisoners from the South to be laborers, or even release any prisoners in prison anywhere to do the work with supervision. Although these prisoners were not afraid of death, they could not do this project because constructing a railroad requires skills. The arguments around this seemed to go round and round endlessly. Some board members proposed to hire short-term labor from Mexico, and this proposal was also denied. Other board members proposed to use the slaves who were just released, but that proposal was denied instantly by the freed African Americans. Why do we have to do the job that the white people don't want to do? We are all free men, and we don't want to do the things that other people don't want to do. Was the company about to fail? In the current situation, there seemed to be no way out. So, the engineer Oliver decided to use the Chinese workers as a trial. He had worked with Chinese workers before and was very impressed with their skills. However, his proposal was rejected by Stanford, because Stanford had promised his district people that he would dismiss all the Chinese workers from California when he won his campaign as governor. Stanford looked down upon these Chinese workers. He thought to himself, why do we use these minority groups of people who have such low social standing to help us build such important and noble things like a railroad? Would this not hurt the pride of our noble race? Adolf, the director of the project, also rejected the proposal. How can we let the low-class ethnic groups in our country build this railroad for us? Look at the white workers. They are so strong and tall, but they're not willing to do this labor. How could these small-statured, famine-faced Chinese workers do this job? Oliver rebuked them. Well, do you want to forfeit this great noble project of building a railroad across America? There are many Asian Americans in San Francisco panning gold, operating laundry businesses, and farming. Don't you see that they are capable and hardworking as a people? Haven't you heard of the Great Wall that they built several thousand years ago? These people are the greatest architects of the world. If they could build the Great Wall, why can't they build a railroad? Stanford was terribly upset. Yes, the noble pride was important, but at the end of the day, he decided that the utmost thing that he had to prioritize was to save his company and to make money. And so he decided to recruit 50 Chinese workers as a trial. It was at about this time that Geng Mao and his brother answered the recruiting ad, and they were brought to the railroad construction site. Geng Mao was very quick in his eyesight. It looks like there's a fight. Let's go and see what's going on. But Genshin stopped him immediately. Don't be bothered. You don't understand what they are arguing about. Maybe they just do this for fun. Geng Mao conceded, maybe you're right. And since they didn't know the language, they could not be particularly helpful. Ban Xianzhou came to California to pan gold 10 years ago. He wore a Chinese robe with Chinese prints of the circle with yin and yang and the fish. Since he could speak some English, he was asked to be the translator. After his talk with the director and the engineer, he came back to tell the Chinese workers, the workers will be paid $26 per month toward the end of the month with no delay in payment. The Chinese workers felt very comfortable with Ban Xianzhou to communicate between the director and themselves. When they looked around and found that they were in the deep forest, they began to build huts for themselves using the wood that they found around them. They wouldn't want to live with these white workers. Genmao and his brother's task was to build a stove so that they could cook and eat. The other Chinese workers were busy trying to use the shovel, the spade, and the cart so that they could be well prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. The director and the engineer went to the coach to discuss their business, seeing that the Chinese workers were settling down. But Alan, who led the white workers on strike, felt very uncomfortable. He led a few white workers to approach the Chinese workers, trying to stop them from building these tents in the forest. However, the Chinese workers didn't know what was going on. Genmao all of a sudden recognized Alan, and he was about to say hi to him, but Alan came to him and grabbed the bowl from his hands and threw it to the ground. "This is our project. Why are you here? You need to leave," Alan yelled at Genmao. Genmao was shocked. He grabbed his bowl back, and Ban Xianzhou came to the rescue. He explained to Genmao, "Just a minute," he said, "this is their project. Do you understand?" Genmao was in shock again. "Really? We were invited here by the engineer. I'm already super hungry. Please do not interrupt my cooking for dinner." Genmao made a face at Alan and opened a bag of cuttlefish and dumped it into a bowl, pretending that Alan wasn't there. Alan was furious, irritated by both his attitude and the bad smell of the cuttlefish. He came to grab the bowl again, but Genmao stretched his leg under Alan's body, and Alan fell down, face planting into the ground. All of the Chinese workers there laughed at him loudly, and when the other white workers came forward as a group trying to attack Genmao, Alan got up quickly, trying to grab Genmao's braid. The engineer Oliver rushed to the site, standing between Alan and Genmao. Adolf watched this fight with a scold smile on his face, his arms held around his own shoulders. "If you two want to duel to resolve your issues, you should choose a different place." Alan said to Genmao, "Let's meet here tomorrow. I'm going to bring my gun." Oliver came up to Alan and said, "Sorry, sir. I don't want to disappoint you, but I think this young man is more suitable to work in my house. My wife will make arrangements for him." So Genmao followed Oliver to his home. Maria kissed Oliver when she came out to meet her husband, and that made Genmao very uncomfortable. Although he had had intimate moments with Juzi, there was nothing that was something like this. Maria called her son to come down to meet Genmao, but they only got a drawing thrown at them from upstairs. There was a sad face on the drawing that said, "I don't need anyone's company." The door was shut with a big bang, followed by music from a flute coming out a little bit later. Genmao's face turned red, and Maria kindly explained, "This is a special way of Brandon welcoming his guests. He's quite terribly afraid of being lonely." Maria told Genmao his job was to teach Brandon martial arts, as Brandon was quite weak physically. In return, Genmao would be taught English. Brandon was sensitive and smart, but at the same time weak and lazy. He liked to draw and play music, and he did not accept Genmao at the beginning, asking him to leave. However, he liked to draw Genmao's braid. Genmao hated other people touching his braid, so he put Brandon down to the ground directly when he tried to touch the braid. That actually made Brandon more excited, so he actively began seeking Genmao's advice on how to practice the martial arts, because he wanted to be able to put other people to the ground in that same way. Genmao was very smart when it came to learning languages, and before long he could speak simple English. When Genmao accompanied Brandon, he would use small sticks in the yard in order to construct a railroad train to pass his time. He missed those railroad trains he saw in the working site. Brandon would grow very excited, and he would paint those wooden train tracks black, and it looked very real with the black paint. This made Oliver very surprised. Oliver realized that Genmao was extremely creative and crafty, and he brought both Brandon and Genmao to the night school of railroad. Brandon would do his own drawing in the classrooms, but Genmao would take serious interests in the railroad train. Over time, Genmao became Brandon's friend. And Genmao wrote to Juzi that he could not go back home since he hadn't found his father, and he simply did not have the money to buy the ship tickets to go back home. Genmao asked her to wait for him and that he promised to marry her as soon as he was able. But after 2 months, Genmao could not stay any longer. He insisted that he needs to go back to the working site to find his brother, for he still wanted to find his father as soon as possible. Genshin had signed a 3-year contract, however, with the Pacific Railroad Company. Therefore, Genmao had no choice but to stick around. And in the meantime, he accepted a job to blow whistles for the time being. He followed Bian Xianzhou around to ask him about his father. Because Bian Xianzhou told Genmao that his father, Jia Dongli, had said goodbye to him, he told him that he bought his ticket going home. Those who knew Jiadong believed that he went home. Bian Xianzhou said Jiadong insisted that he do a fortune-telling about his fate. Genmao asked incredulously, what was the result? I used 8 hangings to calculate his fortune, and the result was not good, was the reply. Genmao was not ready to believe this. He said, you might be wrong. He might already be home. And Bian Xian insisted, I wish I could give you a different, better result. Genshin asked Bian Xian, can you do another one for my dad? So Bian Xian drew 3 coins from his sleeves. He showed to the 2 brothers that the back of the coins were positive, and that the positive side meant bright signals and that simple future. The coins with the words were negative, as the negative sign signaled heaviness and bad luck, and he used 8 different patterns to symbolize different things in the world, using them to calculate their father's fate. Bian Xian was busy talking and moving his hands quickly for quite a while, with something to be said like, to be born is called easy, to form an image is called dry, to imitate the law is called kun, and to know the number of extremes is called occupation. To change is called things, and to be unpredictable is called spirit. And then all of a sudden he stopped. It's inauspicious for both your father and you. He stood up, waving his hands in the air. I will not charge you because the result is not good. I have to go. The faces of the 2 brothers began to turn gray. They did not know what to say. Genmao asked him, why did you use 3 coins to calculate? And Bian Xian answered, this is because there are 3 sources of many. This is the way of fortune-telling. But tree leaves also have backs and fronts. Genmao said, may I use tree leaves to do fortune-telling? Bian Xian answered, as long as you know how to do it, it still works. During that period of time, there were many attacks from the Native Americans and animals during the nighttime. Genmao's job was to blow whistles to alarm the workers whenever anything bad or dangerous might happen. One night, a group of Indians came to attack them, and they threw a lighted torch dipped with oil onto the workers' tent, and they burned the construction tents. Then another group of Indians riding horses came, and they put a bag around Genmao's head and put him on a horseback and rode away into the night.
Dad left home, sadly gone.